Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Seniors Leading Change, How to Build an Elder Abuse Prevention Network. My name is Benedict Schopflin. I'm the Executive Director of CNPEA, the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. And I am joined today backstage by my colleague, Rayanne Raidout from Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. And we are very happy to have you here to present this new resource. Before we start this event, I wanted to acknowledge that we gather on the traditional territory of a number of First Nations. And together we acknowledge their stewardship of this land throughout the ages. We seek a new relationship with the original peoples of this land, one that is based in honor and deep respect. So before we launch into the topic of today's webinar, just a couple of reminders. Since this event is recorded, we have made sure that all attendees are muted in order to protect the quality of the sound and the quality of the recording. So if you wish to communicate with us or with each other, you can use the chat box, and you can use that to post comments during the session. We will be also sharing some links and some resources in there, so keep an eye on it. And then if you have questions for our presenters that we will ask at the end, you can type them in the Q&A box. So that one is at the bottom of your screen. You see two little dialogue bubbles that say Q&A. Click on that and you can type your question there. We will address them at the end. If you are in need of using the ASL services today, we have two interpreters with us today, and you are able to see them by using the little view grid at the top right of your screen. You can choose how and who you want to see and how big you want to make the screen. You can just use the layout that you prefer and then kind of slide that little vertical line left or right to make things bigger or smaller. We have also enabled closed captioning, so you should be able to turn that on if you need it. At the end of the session, we are going to share a link for a survey. So if you have a few minutes to fill out the survey, it would be wonderful. That is great feedback for us to know how to improve from webinar to webinar, and to also welcome suggestions for new themes. And as a reminder, I mentioned the session is recorded today. And once we are done with the event and we process the recording, we'll be able to upload a version of the recording on both the EAPO website, which is eapon.ca, and the CNPEA website, which is cnpea.ca. You'll also be receiving a link of the documents and links that we talk about by email if you've attended the session. So a quick reminder, we say this every time, but it is important. We want to protect your privacy and confidentiality. So this means, since this is a public event and it is recorded and will be made available, visibly on websites, we're really encouraging you not to share any details about personal situations in the chat box or in the Q&A box. The goal is really to protect you and to keep the focus on questions and on the topic of our webinar. If you wish to speak to someone about specific circumstances, I invite you to contact EAPO or CNPEA. We can arrange a follow-up after the webinar to talk about your confidential situation. So, as I mentioned, we are doing this webinar in collaboration with Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario, known as EAPO. They are the Ontario provincial network, and they envision an Ontario where all older people are free from abuse, where they have a strong voice, feel safe and respected. And they are mandated as an organization to support the implementation of Ontario's strategy to combat elder abuse. And then when it comes to my organization, CNPEA, I hope that you are familiar with us, but if you're not, we are the sole pan-Canadian network focused on elder abuse and neglect prevention. And we work to improve awareness, supports, and capacity to develop a national coordinated approach to elder abuse. So we promote the rights of older adults through knowledge mobilization, collaboration, policy reform, and education. And you can find out more, including a long library of resources, as well as a find help section that is broken down by jurisdiction at cnpea.ca. So, as I mentioned, it is about time to get started on our webinar today. We are, oh, I just lost the screen, but that's okay. We're here to talk about a brand new toolkit that CNPEA is launching, which is called Seniors Leading Change, How to Build an Elder Abuse Prevention Network. This is a project that we just finished, funded by New Horizons for Seniors. And this is something that flows directly from our Future Us strategy, which we launched 2 years ago. And here with us to talk about this today, we have two presenters, Margaret McPherson, who is a research associate at the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children. And for those of you who have been following us and Future Us for a while, you know that Margaret has been the architect of Future Us, and she was the project lead on the development of this toolkit we're about to present today. And joining us a little bit later in the presentation to talk about her experience of, developing and leading a network, we will have Sherry Baker, who is now Sherry Baker and Associates, but who until very recently was the executive director of the BC Association of Community Response Networks, known as BCCRN. Now that the introductions are done, I'm going to go off screen and let Margaret take over to talk about Seniors Leading Change. Go ahead, Margaret, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Benedict, and hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you today. I'm going to walk you through the toolkit just to give you a sense of what it contains, and then point you to the website where you can download it yourself. So it is called Seniors Leading Change, and it is a Future Us initiative. I want to start by thanking all the people that we consulted on the project. So we had conversations with each of the provincial and territorial elder abuse prevention networks, as well as a host of a community of practice members of It's Not Right. So thank you to all of you. I also wanted to acknowledge that there's been some really good earlier work done. Allison Leaney and April Struthers put together this resource, the Coordinated Community Response to Abuse of Seniors, many years ago. And we've actually incorporated and adapted that material into the toolkit. Because it's so useful. And then also the Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council has done a very comprehensive toolkit for developing a coordinated community response, an elder abuse prevention network, you can call it, they get called different things, but it has lots of resources. And so we didn't want to duplicate things that have already been done. It's about building on what we've learned, things we've done in the past in order to move forward. So Future Us is a roadmap to elder abuse prevention. As I mentioned, this is part of that larger pan-Canadian strategy about engaging everyone in the work of prevention. And these are the three goals of Future Us: to prioritize elder abuse in every community, and then establish and support elder abuse prevention networks at local, regional, and national levels, and to teach everyone to be able to recognize warning signs and indications of escalating risk, how to respond safely and effectively, and where to refer to find help in the community. Those are the three goals. So this project really focuses on providing new resources to support the second goal. That's the cover on the right hand of the screen for the toolkit. And I just want to, acknowledge that, there may be people who aren't sure why we need elder abuse prevention networks. And I think that, it's so important to recognize the value of having infrastructure to be able to do prevention work, and that we need it at all levels of society, because where we're going, what we want to do is develop a pan-Canadian response of people who know what to do when they see warning signs happening, who know where to go to find help, and how to work together to advocate for change. I see these prevention networks as essential elements in a living, breathing circulatory system that reaches into all communities at all levels, right? Like, this is a way for clusters of people who are doing this work already across the country to not be so isolated in the work, but to be part of larger networks that connect us all together in achieving those common goals. Because ideally, what networks can do is facilitate a flow of information, ideas, and innovation throughout the network, supporting each other, reducing the isolation that people in social change work often feel, and doing that work of engaging and supporting local communities in taking action. Because as you probably all know, the real work happens in communities, between people. This is part of the original presentations that we were making on Future Us that talked about the kinds of activities that networks can participate in, and just to give a visual to this idea about being connected, creating this circulatory system. And so the information and the movement of ideas and inspiration and research is a way for us to develop a truly pan-Canadian approach. We even went so far as to, put some cost to it. What would it cost to create a pan-Canadian approach to elder abuse prevention? And so these were numbers that were put together based on some existing examples and what we know about the work. And what you'll see is that there are costs attributable at all levels of the system. This work is important work that needs to be resourced. So these slides are about a dialogue with our government partners, engaging governments as partners in the work of prevention. I think we have to start by acknowledging the reality for most of the elder abuse prevention networks is that there is not a lot of resources. There's a few at the provincial territorial level that are, receive annualized funding, but this is really the beginning of the work for us. And we have to acknowledge that elder abuse happens in a whole ecosystem, and that ageism isn't just internal attitudes and beliefs that we have, but there is structural ageism that takes place. And you can see that in things like the under-resourcing, the researching of impacts of violence and abuse on older adults. And I think that when we're talking about elder abuse networks, it's really important to put a stake in the ground and say, we can't be relying on volunteers to change, to do this really heavy lifting around social change. These networks absolutely need to be resourced. Because age discrimination is a type of prejudice, right, that actually justifies abusive behavior and leads to the overlooking of consequences. This is part of the sort of the larger systemic inequities. You could think about elder abuse as the most harmful expression of ageism. And so we're not just talking about how it happens at the individual and organizational and community level. We also need to be talking about how it happens at a societal level. So this was our starting place, right? It's like, this is not new work. This is work that's already happening. What we can do through the Canadian network is provide a bigger picture, a pan-Canadian picture of the work, if we think about it as a huge project that we're all involved in. There are provinces and territories that have done an elder abuse prevention strategy. Maybe they need to be updated or, I don't know, but our goal here is to have all of the provinces and territories involved, because what this is a picture of some of the inequities, at a provincial and territorial level, not just a difference in opinions about how, where our priorities are, where funding priorities are. And so if we're going to talk about a pan-Canadian approach, then we want to be starting from an understanding of where we are and what can we change over the years. Can we work toward provincial territorial networks in all of the provinces and territories with annualized funding that actually allows them to support their local communities and the local elder abuse prevention networks? So we've organized the toolkit into 3 sections. The first is reflection, the second is action, and the third is about growth. When we talk about reflecting, the way to capture this idea, I think, is about being the change and walking the talk. We paint a bigger picture that says, we are all social change agents. That is so true if you understand that we live in an interdependent and interconnected world, and that every action that you take has an impact of some kind. And part of what we are called to do is to be more thoughtful about the kind of impact that we are having in any given situation. And in that sense, we all have the ability to make choices in the moment that lean into the kind of change that we want, which is a world without violence and abuse. And we learn by doing. So that's our theory of change, that if we're going to promote the development of networks, the networks themselves need to practice, need to walk the talk and figure out how to engage everyone in the community so that these networks reflect the diversity of the people who live in the local places. And then there are also guiding questions that just are meant to spark discussion. At the end of each of the sections, there's a little infographic that kind of captures the main points that are in the section before. So if you want to skip to a picture, they'll give you the substance of each of the sections. And so in this section, we're going to talk about, putting pieces together, putting different theories and principles and practices together to create a network that is truly welcoming and productive and inclusive of older people and the broader community. So in this section, what we're really talking about is developing an orientation to prevention as a network. So there are lots of resources around community development. We point to some. It's a discipline that does provide a well-established foundation for how to work together. I also want to point to the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report that came out a few years ago, and the call to action that prioritizes relationships and the voices of survivor victims. It's been called, it's a way for us to take a step toward truth and reconciliation with this new framework in privileging our relationships in all of our encounters. Promoting the collective care of members to ensure that there's mutuality. We don't want to be just one way doing things. This is about mutuality. And making sure that we care for each other who do this work, as well as the people that we want to support. Working together to create ethical space in every meeting and encounter. And that's a definition that talks about honoring and respecting different ways of knowing, different kinds of knowledge that are available to us in the multiplicity of our communities. And then grounding ourselves in trauma and violence-informed principles, taking a health equity approach to developing cultural humility that, basically sets you up as a human being that recognizes that no one has all the answers, no one knows the way forward. It is the working together and putting our strengths and our good minds together that will allow us to create new things together to make the kinds of changes that we want. So each of those have links to other resources and websites if you want to learn more about them in terms of developing your own prevention orientation at your network. The second section is about action. So we talk about seniors leading change. It's so important, that idea, nothing about us without us, and that networks are a great place for older people to contribute their skills and gifts while working on, a very important social issue. I lived with my dad for 5 years in a retirement community, and I was so saddened to see how narrow a lot of the people in that community, how narrow their lives were, and that they were looking for purpose. They were looking for, a way to fill their days. And I think that engaging them in this work of, this productive work of social change, but also in the building of community, is part of the network basis. And seniors, need to be leading this work, I think, for many reasons. And so figuring out how to support that, enable that, support older people who want to start a network, rallying around them to help them make it happen. That's the idea of seniors leading change. Nothing about us without us. And then there's practical information about starting a network, the kind of defining your purpose, practices that you're going to put into place, and developing a shared understanding. This is a really important piece. And when you look at other countries and work that they're doing around violence prevention, this is fundamental, that you can't assume that everyone has the same understanding of issues, and that a way to sort of get yourselves onto the same page about what the issues are in your community, how you want to talk about them, how you think about them, is part of questions is to, sit and talk about elder abuse and ageism as it shows up in your community. And what we've done, what I suggested is that you create your own sort of one-pager that you can share in the community as one of your sort of marketing tools for the network. But we've also taken the liberty of creating an infographic that you can just pick up and start to use as part of this. And so it's double-sided so that you can talk about elder abuse, sort of the prevalence, and the issue about aging, the demographic in Canada. And then there's content about elder abuse prevention networks. This just gives you a bit of a running start on having materials that you can share with organizations, officials, about what you're working on. And then at the end of this section is another infographic that describes what's in it. So as far as we're concerned, anyone can start a network. It starts with the question, who wants to build a network? And then you identify who's in your community and you convene a group. I always want to say that people want to get to action so quickly, but the building of relationships, the prioritizing of relationships is slow work that takes time. And in a way, that is a bit of resistance against a world that is moving so fast and that would have you just not really take the time to be present for each other and to really hear what others have to say and to think about a way forward. So you're going to talk about the purpose of your network. It may, I think it's good to say these things out loud and talk about them. And then we're also talking about the practice. So the outer work that's done to educate and engage people in the community, but also the really important work, the internal work for the network about the care of your membership, how you're growing it, how you're developing it, and do people actually feel like they belong and have a contribution to make? That is the internal work for networks, about being the change and walking the talk. So there's ideas about creating your agenda, and then more information around sort of the kind of process that you might want to develop your practices around, and the actions, the discussions that you'll need to have about how you want to move forward. There's a relationship between process and actions. You do want to get to action, but you absolutely want to take the time to prioritize your relationships. So you might want to start a community conversation. There's a section about hosting a public meeting, ideas about how to do that, things to be thinking about. And then the final section is about growth. And I think that, a big part of this is about advocacy. And so there are a number of ideas here about ways in which networks can advocate for change in their communities, but also think about your strategies for growth, how you want to develop. The future us is up to us, and we absolutely need people to be engaged with us. So the toolkit is the next step for future us in terms of contributing new resources, and you can find it at the website. It's available to be downloaded now. And then I just want to return for a minute around future us, other things you can do. Tell us what you're doing. We know people are contributing every day to creating a positive world. Tell us what you're doing. Go to the website, add yourself to the map, and then share Future Us, share this toolkit. Tell us about what you're doing, and we will keep monitoring what's happening, talking with you, creating this bigger picture of change as we go. This is also an infographic that just takes us back to this bigger picture of a pan-Canadian approach in which citizens, organizations, communities, and also governments are all working together on these common goals. Ultimately, for me, it comes down to asking yourself, what do you envision for yourself as you get older? And what are we hoping for our children and grandchildren? The work to make that happen now, it's here, it's right now. So I invite you to join us and to tell us about your, what you're doing with your networks, whether you have one that's already functioning, and maybe this is helpful in getting you to reflect on, questions about how inclusive you are, how much of a reach you have in your community, or just stimulating some new kinds of conversations. Or whether you are, in fact, one of these people who want to start a network. We would be happy to support you in any way we can. Just keep us informed about what you're doing. That's the end of the presentation with respect to the toolkit. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I need to move my camera to actually find the button. There. And then I'm going to invite Sherry to join me. Hi, Sherry.
I'm going to say good morning, but I know it's afternoon where you are. And it's
morning, afternoon. So Benedict and I thought it would be a great idea, Sherry, for you to come and just talk with us about your experience. How long were you the executive director at the BCCRN?
almost 14 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me just say, I just want to say that, one of the things that we do in the advocacy work that we do when we're talking with potential different government partners is point to the BCCRN as an example of what happens when there's funding to do the work of prevention through networks. So your network has kind of been the gold standard in Canada, I would say, and so that's why we wanted to give you the opportunity to just weigh in a little bit about your experience.
I'm really excited to do this, and I've only been away from them for 15 days, so I still call them mine. I mean, at some point, I'm sure it'll be they, but right now it's still mine. And so forgive me, the people who are watching, that I'm so possessive of this, but it was a journey that I was given such a privilege to be able to take, to incorporate the values and the principles of collective impact and systems theory and so on, and working with communities from the community, bringing everything from the ground up to do the work. And I've got so much I want to say about it that I did have to make some notes because I know that there's not very much time. And there's a message I want to give out there about actually how you do it, what it looks like. And of course, I know you have questions that you want to ask. So I just let me um, lead the way, Margaret, and we'll see what we
Okay.
can do.
Okay, well, that's great, Sherry. I think that one of my first questions was, what do you think has changed in BC as a result of having the network?
That's actually quite easy to answer, and it won't take long. When I first got the money to do this work in 2012, the first thing I did was hire an evaluator, a develop a chap that I had met in my other life, I guess, or one of the other lives. And I really liked what he told me about developmental evaluation. And so this was a huge opportunity, I thought. I talked to, his name is Ben, and I talked to him, and we talked about what I hoped we were going to be able to do in the province, and engaged him right at the beginning. He's still doing the work, going into the 13th year of an developmental evaluation. And what I asked him to do is, the government has given us money to do elder abuse awareness and prevention in the province of BC, period. That's what they asked us to do. And I said to Ben, I'd like you to measure whether we're actually doing what we've been paid to do. And that's exactly what we did. So over the years, as is a developmental process, it changed as we changed and grew and became more complex. But we do know that the awareness of abuse, neglect, and self-neglect, and elder abuse, and ageism, although even in those days it wasn't being talked about as ageism, is actually increasing throughout the province. And we know, because people know the CRNs, the community response networks, they know that they're existing. Now there are 91 of them now in the province. So the whole awareness, because I believe, and I'm sure most other people believe, that if you're going to prevent something, you have to be aware of it. You have to know what it is that you're trying to prevent. So that's where we started. And we're still doing it. We're still growing. We're still learning. We're still trying new things. But that's the culture of this organization, that we do that. And so that's how we know that this is changing. And ultimately, we don't know for sure yet, because the awareness is increasing, the reports of abuse, neglect, and self-neglect. And
Yes.
but ultimately we will have safer communities. It will be like, I always think of it like smoking. When I was in the 40 and and 40 years old, and that, and in the 80s and 70s, 80s, and so on. We smoked everywhere. Everybody smoked. And we talked about it. And now it's a rarity. And
Yeah.
that's what I would like to think with the abuse and neglect, is that it will become something that is just not done, and it's not thought of as something that is okay. But people have to know what it looks like first, and that's our job.
Um, can I ask how did you address inclusivity? What was the process that you used to engage and include Indigenous communities, diverse communities? Inclusivity, I know, has been really important to you. So I'm interested in how you went about that work.
I did not go about it with an intent. It was just it's all around our values and the principles that we do. The BCCRN we started right away with a really strong strategic plan with a vision, safe communities, of our mission, how we were going to get it, our goals, and our goals were always incorporated inclusivity to get to that place. So we know that the communities are all different and they have lots of diversity. We've over the years, we've developed toolkit, not so much cool tips, but statements, and we brought in experts around what the DEI, the diversity, inclusion, equity looks like. How do we do it? We've talked about it. We talk about it internally. We just learn as much as we can. But when right now we have a Punjabi community response network, which incorporates the huge South Asian community in Surrey and Abbotsford mainly. We have but they do their work in Punjabi. We have a big Chinese community response network, which is working with the people in Vancouver and Richmond, mainly in the Lower Mainland. There and all the materials for both of these are all in their own languages. We have presenters in their own languages and so on. So and of course it was made really evident with the pandemic, with about isolation. So lots of breaking up of, breaking down the isolation of the people. And so anyway, we have a French one. We have two LGBTQ, 2S plus community response networks, one on the Vancouver Island, one in the Lower Mainland. We've had several and two new ones actually, Aboriginal, Indigenous ones. And then what we also do is when we work together is one of the questions that I always asked was who else should be at the table and who else is in your community. This is we have 15 regional mentors. We're totally virtual. We have been right from the start. Everything is done. We started with conference calls on the telephone and then of course Zoom. And so we're helping each other find ways to reach out to the various immigrant communities, all the other diversity that's available. And we are also mandated under the adult guardianship in British Columbia to be the designated agencies for abuse, neglect, and self-neglect. And the designated and we're not the designated agencies, but the designated agencies in the Act are the 5 regional health authorities and Community Living BC, which is the disability population. So they are very much part of what we do. And there's Providence Health, which has some of the big hospitals and so on. So if there is a report of abuse, neglect, or self-neglect, they are required to investigate it. And we also work closely with the public guardian and trustee, the police, and all the other agents. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute or two. So it's the diversity is just, I find it uncomfortable to sit and say, this is what we're going to do about diversity because it's so integrated into all the work that we do. Our board has always been geographically diverse, culturally diverse as much as you can. It's a fairly small board. Our 15 regional mentors, we have a fair amount of diversity amongst the members of our team. They share with each other what it's like to be a woman of color or South Asian or whatever it might be, and they share with one another what that is. So that's how we do it, and I don't know how you replicate it. You can't do. This is step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 because it's a very much of an organic thing.
Well, and I think that it's a matter, it is a way that you approach it and understanding that our strength is in our diversity and integrating, being welcoming, reaching out and including people, inviting them, attending other people's, I think those are all ways to integrate it just into our practice, into our daily life.
Yeah, what we find working with, especially with well, all of them in one way or another, but with the Indigenous communities especially, is that they don't really appreciate you coming in and said, here we are, you lucky people, we're going to offer you this to do. We have to start with abuse and say, if this is something that is an issue in your community, how would you like to, how would
Yes.
you deal with it? How can we help you? And
Yes.
listen to them, what they do. And we've
Yeah.
created materials and so on. We have materials in, I don't know, 10 or 12 different languages. We've got people presenting a lot of the immigrant communities. So yeah, it's that shift in trusting the fact that people
Yeah.
know best how to do this work.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Recognizing the strengths. Yeah. And, giving people support to do what they do.
that's right. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so my other question, Sherry, so if you were going to give advice to a government funder on how to support community development and follow the success you've had, what advice would you give?
I don't very often give advice. I have a couple of things I'd like to bring in after this. I mean, but maybe you want to have this first, and then I've got a couple of what I'd like to do is take you through at a community how this actually works, like how it would work with somebody who had revealed that they were being abused. So if you want
Mm,
to do the government thing first, I can do that, and then I can
do that first, Sherry.
I can take you through some of the other things because I'd also like to talk about the money piece.
Yeah.
And well, which it all ties together. So
Yeah.
anyway, governments are usually respond, not always, but usually respond well to requests for funding support if they can be convinced that it is to their advantage, either financially and or politically. I mean, that's the reality of our governments. Nothing
Yeah.
wrong with it. It just is. But the CRN model increases community participation and awareness of abuse, neglect, and self-neglect, and of ageism. And in doing so, it involves all parts of the community and cuts down on duplication and waste, which is an important piece that governments like. It provides the opportunity for the government to be able to point out how they care and support the communities. It's built on trust and statistics, numbers. We collect numbers on everything regularly. And in BC last year, over 4,500 people attended awareness workshops, mainly are built around the It's Not Right Neighbors, Friends, and Family model. Over 1,000 people around it, I'm not sure exact numbers of this, attended the BCCRN learning events, one of which is on right this minute. And I'll be zipping off to that as soon as we're finished. And we know that we can count over 20,000 people in our province who have attended community events and projects and so on, put on by or supported by their local community response networks. And those are all people who are aware that this is the government that is making this possible. So that's if I were to be giving an advice, I wouldn't tell them what to do. I would just give them this information and say, I think this matters. I really think this matters to you as a government to show that you are paying attention to the huge demographic of almost half, a quarter of the population of this age. And they're working together in their communities and they have voices.
Absolutely. Government as community partners. I think this is a case we need to make. And the other thing is that, Sherry, I think what really has allowed you to work in the way that you have is that your government trusts you. It gives you the money and says you and the communities figure out where your priorities are and how you're going to do things. And that is a kind of trust that I think we need to foster with our government partners so that because it's the people on the ground doing the work, living in the communities who know best. And so the further away you stand from that, the more we need to put our energies together to support that work on the
Okay.
ground in communities.
So let me just tell you a little bit how we do that.
Yeah,
Because
please.
our only source of funding is through the Ministry of Health in the province of British Columbia, which gives us at the moment it's 1 $4 million a year, plus another $200,000 from the gaming account. So that's $1.6 million is our budget. We do everything for that. We do not raise any more money. It's wonderful. I don't have to raise money, but anyway, I need to pay attention to this. But let me just say, the key to the success is the judicious use of those funds. So everything that we do is run by we're pretty much all of us are professionals. Everybody is on contract, and everybody has a defined list or a set of deliverables. Only two of the people out of the 25 or so people who are on contract with the BCCRN work full time. Many of them, I would say close to half of them are retired, and they're doing this post-retirement. And many of them also have consulting practices that they also do at the same time. Part of the reason why I think that's really important is that we do not do direct service to individuals. And many of the people who work with us have had a history in their professional lives of providing service. And it's not, I didn't want to tempt them to get into that direct service. They're there to serve the communities. And the mentors, the 15 mentors, support the 81 ones. Some of them are there. We have 2 coordinators, and some of the networks, there's close to 100 coordinators. The hourly rate that we pay people is competitive with the unionized social service sector workers in the social services sector, and also takes into account that there are no benefits. So it's fair compensation, which is also really important.
Yeah.
And, the CRN coordinators who are started as volunteers in the community, or maybe members of these host agencies, because some of the CRNs have a host agency. Most of them do now, not all of them. But many of the coordinators that's part of their job in the agency. Some of them are volunteers, and it's up to the community to figure that out. But the coordinators of the 91 networks are given a set of annual deliverables, and that's where a lot of our statistics come from. And they qualify, each of them qualifies for up to $2,000 a year in an honorarium. They can also, because they're not being paid to do the work, but the work that they're doing is being recognized. And then and the amount that they are paid of the honorarium depends on whether they meet on all the deliverables or not. And then each community response network, the 91 community response networks, can apply for up to $5,000 a year, usually not in one chunk. It's usually in smaller pieces, to do projects, to do activities, to do World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, to have a seniors tea, to do some research, whatever they want to do. And often they work with other funding opportunities in the community and combine it and have even a bigger effect. And I notice anyway that a lot of the events that are going on across the province have our little logo on them, that we're helping the community. It's communities doing this work, and we're being recognized for that. We manage that, of course, and keep track of it. Our application process is very simple, but we keep track of everything. Of course, it's public money, and the government knows that, and it's part of our annual reporting. And we have, annual audits and all those kinds of things. But it's up to the communities to decide how they want to use these funds. Sometimes they don't, because they're busy. We have to remember that communities kind of have their own life cycle, and sometimes they aren't ready. They're just not ready to do this work. Sometimes they are super ready. I mean, it's just each one is. And so it's up to our regional mentors to keep them involved, be patient, and support them when they're on steroids. I mean, they're all different, and we have to respect that. And so that's what we do. All these funds come from the annual grants from the Ministry of Health and Gaming. And as I mentioned, we're virtual, have always been virtual. There's no office expenses. There's no other cost of maintaining a store other than we have the cost of maintaining a really quite a large storage unit where we have over $100,000 worth of materials, brochures, you name it, that we produce and distribute around the province through an order form so people can order what they want. A little, branded things that people can give out. That's part of our government money. So I don't know if we have time, but I'd love to take you through how this actually works at the community level.
Sure. I think we have a few minutes. Yeah.
Okay, with that, I have it written, so I won't be going off on tangents like I tend to do. So I'm going to it's a little kind of a little story. So one day, an older woman was talking to an acquaintance at the local, who was a volunteer. This acquaintance was a volunteer at the local senior center. And during their conversation, she revealed that her son was demanding access to her bank account and that he had moved her into the basement of his home. The senior center was a member of the local community response network and had hosted presentations of It's Not Right, Neighbors, Friends, and Family, bystander engagement, and so on with their volunteers. So the volunteers had knowledge from those presentations. And during the presentations, they learned that the other members of the Community Response Network, who they were, and how they played a role in responding to abuse, neglect, and self-neglect. The volunteer was able to offer this information to the older member to whom she was speaking and get permission from her to contact the local representative of the health authority, which is the designated responder under the Adult Guardianship Act and responsible for investigating reports. If the older woman was not ready to take this step, and most of them aren't actually, the volunteer would offer other services which were available to help her make her own decisions about how to handle her money and where she could live safely. She may want to be put in touch with a local advocate who would support her in this journey. And these are all services that are available through the network or people who belong to the network. The local CRN is made up of the service providers, the agencies, the professionals, the volunteers who are interested and committed to building a coordinated community response to abuse, neglect, and self-neglect of vulnerable adults in their community. They are all different and can include the local health authority, the police, the victim services, senior centers, Meals on Wheels, bankers, lawyers, notaries, pharmacists, local government, community living services, faith communities, and so on. They may meet in person. They may meet virtually. They may meet a combination of both. They may just have mailing lists and emailing back and forth. But regardless, they learn about what to look for, how to respond, and to whom they can refer for help in their community. And that's the key piece of a network. In BC, the CRNs are self-governing, working with the support and mentorship, the support and mentorship and guidance from the provincial BC CRN. There are currently 91 networks serving 250 communities in BC, including, and I've told you, the Chinese, Punjabi, French, and so on. There are materials available in over 10 different languages, and people in the immigrant services agencies are trained to deliver the information and materials. And a lot of the municipalities, the City of Vancouver, libraries, victim service, a lot of these other provincial agencies, we adapt the programs, the workshops, using the most of it's around the It's Not Right basis, so that it's relevant to them. And then we train their presenters so that they can deliver that material in-house. But we don't just give it to them. We do just give it to them actually, but we do train the presenters. We require that they give us their stats, where they're doing it, how they're doing it, and how many people are there.
Okay.
And we make sure that they're properly trained to do the work.
It's good. It's a great picture, Sherry. I thank you for that. I think it is most important to tie it down to how it actually makes a difference to people in their communities. You know, the coordination, putting our efforts together, working together, I think is the picture that you're sharing that's so important. And with the investments from provincial territorial governments, I think we need these networks in every province and territory. And then we need to be supporting the work in the local communities so that, you know, that picture of people being able to find help when they need it is happening everywhere. So we're out of time. I want to thank you for all the work you've done in your leadership over the years and for joining us here today. I'm sure it's not the last conversation we'll have.
Thank you, Margaret, and thanks for the leadership and the work that you've done. I've enjoyed working with you for the last 10 or 12 years on this work. I'm not going away. I'm still passionate about the work, and I'd hope that we can work together. And congratulations on the toolkit. I did read it through, and it's a nice document. I hope that the BCCRN will put it up on their website so that people can get it from there as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Benedict, did you want to?
Hi, thank you, Sherry, so much for answering our questions. It was actually very nice to hear that sort of overview of all the work that has been done and how it took place. I was monitoring the chat box while you two were chatting. There was a lot of comments flying back and forth about people who really wanted to hear more about advocacy and about long-term care, which is not quite the topic of today. So I was trying to monitor these while you were talking about the networks. But a reminder, so for anyone who is present, who is listening in, this guide was developed because we want to build a stronger, more tight infrastructure of prevention across the country. Right? It's like start upstream and be there to limit the risks and to build a better, stronger wraparound system for support for older adults in their communities. Built by and with older adults. So this is what today is about. This is what this toolkit is about. And this is because we've heard many calls from people saying, I would like to do something in my community or in my province. I just don't know where to start. It feels overwhelming. So this guide is made for this. It is breaking down step by step the things you need to consider, think about, and do in order to start moving in the direction of building a network, a prevention network. And that prevention network can and most definitely will include an advocacy angle. And that is where I hope to see all your fiery comments take flight, because you have a lot to contribute. I can see the anger and I understand it fully. And that's where it can be funneled into something constructive. So today was not a day for talking about, advocacy and scandals. God knows we've done it in other webinars. Today was about talking about how we can organize to be more efficient in taking matters into our own hands and working with other parts of the community. And yes, that includes government to a certain extent. But I will let you discover the rest of the toolkit for yourselves. The link has been shared in the chat box several times. We will be sending it as well, and it will be shared again when we list the slides and the recording in the next few days. A reminder that tomorrow we are doing this session again, but in French. So if you know anyone who is a French speaker or Francophone who would like to hear about this, send them our way. The links are shared on our usual websites and social media. Sherry, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the work you did at BCCRN, for the work you did at the Canadian Network. You were a force to be reckoned with, and one of the reasons why I'm here today, I have to say, mentoring me over the past 9 years. So it's a pleasure to have you and to hear you speak about this and what you've accomplished in British Columbia.
Thanks, Benedict. It's been my life. I'm so excited about being part of it and seeing it grow. It's great. And keep up the good work, both of you, and the Toolkit, Future Us, CNPEA. When Rayanne and I were on the hiring committee for you, Benedict, way back when. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Rayanne, do you want to close the session?
Yes, thank you, Benedict, and thank you both Margaret and Sherry. It's always nice to reconnect and work again with you and Sherry with your recent retirement. And for all those who attended today, to share your comments. And just to reiterate what Benedict was saying is, we were monitoring the comments around advocacy, and there are people who are in the legal field who are doing some really good advocacy, but it is also at that local level where we rally the troops per se to have a stronger voice when we want to go to the government, and through the voice of the networks, we can have a unified collective voice across our own jurisdictions to make change through that level. So as opposed to one voice, we have the voices of hundreds or sometimes thousands, depending on where you are. So there are benefits of having a networks. I put in the link for the Ontario. If you want to find the networks within your region, you can go onto our website and find that, and BCCRN in the same situation. They have a listing, I think 92 is the latest I heard in BC, and we're over 45, I think, in Ontario. So please reach out, and if you have any other questions. So thank you to our ASL interpreters. And for tomorrow's webinar, again, will be in Francais. So it will be held by Benedict, as well as her colleague, Denise Lemure, who will host that webinar for tomorrow. So thank you all, and we will do our best to get the session posted on our websites as soon as possible. So thank you very much.